Tales of the Little People with Drew. Part 3. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10x10x10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. We spent last week in Montana with the Cosmographia crew and a bunch of great attendees. It was a good trip.
And the Grimerica boys?
Yeah, Grimerica boys. Darren was there. Yeah. That was awesome. Montana's beautiful. I mean, it's a lot of driving.
It is.
It was a lot of driving.
1,000 miles.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of driving. But it's a great trip. And so that's why we didn't have a show last week. But we're back, and we are continuing on with our buddy Drew with the report on the little people. So, Drew, thanks again, man, for coming back. This is part 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Fabulously backlit.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the words are front lit, which helps. So, anyway.
Drew has a reputation to maintain. Folks,
Yeah.
So you can't be
That's right.
brightly
Look,
lit.
ever since I moved to Kansas a couple of years ago, I've tried to maintain a certain optimism, and I like to think that's reflected in my performance here, you know? So,
some people were saying it looked like you were in a hostage situation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I've been blinking Morse code, and y'all haven't been clocking it. No, just so I can read.
Yeah.
Gotta read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm in paper form.
We're buying
here,
it.
folks.
We're buying it.
Yeah, totally buying it.
That's right.
100%.
That's right.
All right. So I think last time we left up, you were telling me we're going to start with Arthur Conan Doyle.
That's right. So this will wrap up the UK, the sort of European section, and I think wrap up really what a lot of us are most familiar with when it comes to this fairy lore.
Yeah.
And it functions to start off this conversation because it does. You know, he sort of brings up a lot of the points from prior episodes. So if you're just jumping in, this should function quite well. So I'm actually going to start with the description of Arthur Conan Doyle and his relationship to the fairy lore, just in case anybody hasn't heard anything about the fairy photos and all that. The guy at sacredtext.com did a pretty decent rundown. So I'm going to start with that, if that's all right, just to catch everybody up if anybody isn't familiar with why Sherlock Holmes is tied to this. Okay, so Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, in his later years became attracted to spiritualism and occult topics. This was after the death of his son Raymond during World War I. While researching the topic of fairies, some photographs from a working-class family in rural Yorkshire were brought to Doyle's attention by a theosophist friend. These photographs appeared to show diminutive fairies cavorting in the presence of humans, specifically 2 teenage girls, Elsie and Frances. They had taken the photographs by themselves, and there were no overt signs that the negatives had been tampered with. Doyle championed the photographs and in the process destroyed his reputation, which is probably why this book, out of all of his corpus, has not been put into e-text until now. The Coming of the Fairies was possibly a bigger disappointment for Doyle fans than when he killed off Sherlock Holmes. So that's in reference to this book that we're going to be quoting, The Coming of Fairies by Arthur Conan Doyle. But hold on, a couple more paragraphs on the photographs. So these photographs, which caused a sensation at the time, are easily recognizable as blatant fakes by modern eyes, sensitized to seeing much more photorealistic computer-generated elves and fairies. The fairies are statically posed and are neatly coiffed and dressed in period clothing, hardly what one would expect from wild nature elementals. They are just too flat-looking and high contrast to be anything other than cardboard cutouts positioned in the scene, and could be constructed by adolescent girls with artistic leanings. And indeed, many years later, the pair did admit that they had faked the photos. However, even a skeptic will have to admit that just because these photos are fake, it does not logically imply that there are no such beings. Just because some UFO photos are fake doesn't mean that there are no UFOs. But extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. While we may not have extraordinary proof of fairies, there is more to the phenomena than meets the eye. Enough data that some explanation must be attempted. Doyle barely scratches the surface of the massive literature on fairies here. For a comprehensive survey, go to Evan Wentz, The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries. Okay. So that's just a brief summary of how Arthur Conan Doyle came to be involved in this. Was one of, he just became interested in the occult and spiritualism at the same time these photographs became public, and he sort of got wrapped up in it. The author from Sacred Text goes out of his way to say that this book was a big disappointment. It is funny because I think, I mean, it may show some of my biases. I think it ages pretty well. He's got some pretty interesting points. And the thing I was trying to get across last episode that I don't know that I really hammered home is that the pygmy theory, this Mac Ritchie, this whole, look, some people used to live here and these stories are just the remnants of them. We'll hear Conan Doyle, and we've heard others knock holes in that. That still is the main understanding, as far as I can tell, for how these stories, that is still the mainstream explanation from what I can tell, despite Conan Doyle and others making some pretty good points. And I just think that ties into a lot of things y'all talk about on the Snake Bros, is that the standard model in this is one of, it's all very explainable.
Yeah, that's right.
Despite there being obvious evidence to the contrary. So I guess without further ado, keep moving here? Or do you want?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So quoting the majority of chapter 5, and this is again the book The Coming of the Fairies by Arthur Conan Doyle, 1922. So this is Observations of a Clairvoyance in the Cottingley Glen, August of 1921. Presumably, the descriptions below are the experiences of the clairvoyants and may or may not have been shared by everyone in attendance. So what I'm going to read will be what the clairvoyant reported. This is fantastic, as what I am assuming would be a description of second sight. You know, this would be sort of a lived experience of it. So here we go. Gnomes and fairies. In the field, we saw figures about the size of the gnome. They were making weird faces and grotesque contortions at the group. One in particular took great delight in knocking his knees together. These forms appeared to Elsie singly, one dissolving and another appearing in its place. I, however, saw them in a group with one figure more prominently visible than the rest. Elsie saw also a gnome like the one in the photograph, but not so bright and not colored. I saw a group of female figures playing a game, somewhat resembling the children's game of oranges and lemons. They played in a ring. The game resembled the grand chain of the Lancers. One fairy stood in the center of the ring, more or less motionless, while the remainder, who appeared to be decked with flowers and to show colors, not normally their own, danced around her. Some joined hands and made an archway for the others, who moved in and out as in a maze. I noticed that the result of the game appeared to be the forming of a vortex of forces, which streamed upwards to an apparent distance of 4 or 5 feet above the ground. I also noticed that in those parts of the field where the grass was thicker and darker, there appeared to be a correspondingly extra activity among the fairy creatures. So that was one set. Now, the water nymph. In the beck itself, near the large rock at a slight fall in the water, I saw a water sprite. It was an entirely nude female figure with long fair hair, which it appeared to be combing or passing through its fingers. I was not sure whether it had any feet or not. Its form was of a dazzling rosy whiteness, and its face very beautiful. The arms, which were long and graceful, were moved with a wave-like motion. It sometimes appeared to be singing, though no sound was heard. It was in a kind of cave, formed by a projecting piece of rock and some moss. Apparently it had no wings, and it moved with a sinuous, almost snake-like motion, in a semi-horizontal position. Its atmosphere and feeling was quite different from that of the fairies. It showed no consciousness of my presence, and, though I waited with the camera in hope of taking it, it did not detach itself from the surroundings in which it was in some way merged. Okay. Now, same. So this is all continuing on with that clairvoyance experience. There's 2 more here. The wood elves. So this is labeled as being under the old beeches in the wood in Cottingley, August 12th, 1921. 2 tiny wood elves came racing over the ground past us as we sat on a fallen tree trunk. Seeing us, they pulled up short about 5 feet away and stood regarding us with considerable amusement but no fear. They appeared as if completely covered in a tight-fitting one-piece skin, which shone slightly as if wet. They had hands and large feet and out of proportion to their bodies. Their legs were somewhat thin, ears large and pointed upwards, being almost pear-shaped. There were a large number of these figures racing around the ground. Their noses appeared almost pointed and their mouths wide. no teeth, and no structure inside the mouth, not even a tongue so far as I could see. It was as if the whole were made up of a piece of jelly. Surrounding them, as an etheric double surrounds a physical form, is a greenish light, something like a chemical vapor. As Francis came up and sat within a foot of them, they withdrew, as if in alarm, a distance of 8 feet or so, where they remained apparently regarding us and comparing notes of their impressions. These two live in the roots of a huge beech tree. They disappeared they disappeared through a crevice into which they walked, as one might walk into a cave, and sank below the ground.
Yeah, that's strange. That's a strange description there with the,
Mm-hmm.
no tongue, no teeth.
No tongue.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact words, but they looked like jelly.
Yeah.
Like
they were all made
as
of
if
one.
The whole were made up of a piece of jelly.
Yeah. That's weird.
Okay. That's like the predator phenomenon. Anyway. All right. And then last of this is a water fairy, August 14th, 1921. By a small waterfall, which threw up a fine spray, was seen poised in the spray a diminutive fairy from an exceedingly tenuous nature. It appeared to have 2 main colorings, the upper part of its body and aura being pale violet, the lower portion pale pink. This coloring appeared to penetrate right through aura and denser body, the outline of the latter merging into the former. This creature hung poised, its body curved gracefully backwards, its left arm held high above its head, as if upheld by the vital force in the spray, much as a seagull supports itself against the wind. It was as if lying on its back in a curved position against the flow of the stream. It was human in shape, but did not show any characteristics of sex. It remained motionless in this position for some moments, then flashed out of view, and I did not notice any wings. So I included that, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump to the very last bit where I have my my notes. My notes on this part are that clairvoyant may be absolutely full of shit. He may have second sight. That's quite a path, the forking of opinions of what could be going on there. That's unlike anything I have ever experienced. I've never seen anything like what this person is describing seeing, plain as day.
Yeah.
Considering all the stories we've had about second sight, there's a chance that there are people who experience this all the time, and this is part of reality, and not everyone is observing it through the physical medium.
Yeah, I know, like, just from personal stories, people who have taken, psychedelics like entheogens, and they've seen stuff like this while they're on it. So, it could be that, I guess there's a couple of options. Like, number one, this could be part of reality that we can only see when we're under that kind of influence. And some people may always be kind of tuned to that channel, and that would be what second sight is. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like, we have friends who've said they've seen little people when under the influence. So,
yep, I've seen a few.
I have not personally, I don't think, seen any, but
can't deny
and there's of course, there's the famous, there is McKenna and the dancing elves, of course.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Well, let's just power through with now a bit of Arthur Conan Doyle's thoughts, and he's gonna quote Sabina Baring Gould at one point in this, but tucked into a broader argument that I think does a great job of summing up where we are on trying to assess this. So I'll leave it to Artie.
All right. Let's hear what Artie has to say.
Yeah. Lest I should be too diffuse, I limit myself in this essay to the fairies, and passing all the age-long tradition, which is so universal and consistent, come down to some modern instances which make one feel that this world is very much more complex than we had imagined, and that there may be upon its surface some very strange neighbors who will open up inconceivable lines of science for our posterity, especially if it should be made easier for them, by sympathy or other help, to emerge from the deep and manifest upon the margin. Taking a large number of cases which lie before me, there are 2 points which are common to nearly all of them. One is that children claim to see these creatures far more frequently than adults. This may possibly come from greater sensitiveness of apprehension, or it may depend upon these little entities having less fear of molestation from the children. The other is that more cases are recorded in which they have been seen in the still, shimmering hours of a very hot day than at any other time. The action of the sun upon the brain, says the skeptic. Possibly, and also possibly not. If it were a question of raising the slower vibrations of our surroundings, one could imagine that still, silent heat would be the very condition which might favor such a change. What is the mirage of the desert? What is the scene of hills and lakes which a whole caravan can see while it faces in a direction where for 1,000 miles of desert there is neither hill nor lake, nor any cloud or moisture to produce refraction? I can ask the question, but I do not venture to give an answer. It is clearly a phenomenon which is not to be confused with the erect or often inverted image which is seen in a land of clouds and of moisture. If the confidence of children can be gained and they are led to speak freely, it is surprising how many claim to have seen fairies. My younger family consists of 2 little boys and 1 small girl, very truthful children, each of whom tells with detail the exact circumstances and appearance of the creature. To each it happened only once, and in each case it was a single little figure, twice in the garden, once in the nursery. Inquiring among friends shows that many children have had the same experience, but they close up at once when met by ridicule and incredulity. Sometimes the shapes are unlike those which they would have gathered from picture books. Fairies are like nuts and moss, says one child in Lady Glenconner's charming study of family life. My own children differ in the height of the creatures, which may well vary, but in their dress they are certainly not unlike the conventional idea, which, after all, may also be the true one. There are many people who have a recollection of these experiences of their youth and try to afterwards explain them away on material grounds, which do not seem adequate or reasonable. Thus, in his excellent book on folklore, the Reverend Sabina Baring Gould, gives us a personal experience which illustrates several of the points already mentioned. In the year 1838, he says, when I was a small boy of 4 years old, we were driving to Montpellier on a hot summer day over the long straight road that traverses a pebble and rubble-strewn plain, on which grows nothing save a few aromatic herbs. I was sitting on the box with my father when, to my surprise, I saw legions of dwarves of about 2 feet high running alongside the horses. Some sat laughing on the pole, some were scrambling up the harness to get on the backs of the horses. I remarked to my father what I saw when he abruptly stopped the carriage and put me inside beside my mother, where the conveyance being closed, I was out of the sun. The effect was that little by little, the host of imps diminished in number till they disappeared altogether. Here, certainly, the advocates of sunstroke have a strong, though by no means a final case. Mr. Baring Gould's next illustration is a sounder one. When my wife was a girl of 15, he says, she was walking down a lane in Yorkshire between green hedges when she saw seated in one of the privet hedges a little green man, perfectly well made, who looked at her with his beady black eyes. He was about 1 foot or 15 inches high. She was so frightened that she ran home. She remembers it was a summer day. A girl of 15 is old enough to be a good witness, and her flight and the clear detail of her memory point to a real experience. Again, we have the suggestion of a hot day. Baring Gould has yet a third scene. One day a son of mine, he says, was sent into the garden to pick pea pods for the cook to shell for dinner. Presently he rushed into the house as white as chalk to say that while he was thus engaged and standing between the rows of peas, he saw a little man wearing a red cap, a green jacket, and brown knee breeches, whose face was old and wan, and who had a gray beard and eyes as black and hard as sloes. He stared so intently at the boy that the latter took to his heels. Here again, the pea pods show that it was summer, and probably the heat of the day. Once again, the detail is very exact and corresponds closely, as I shall presently show, to some independent accounts. Mr. Baring Gould is inclined to put all these down to the heat, conjuring up the familiar pictures of fairy books, but some further evidence may cause the reader to doubt this explanation. Let us compare with these stories the very direct evidence of Mrs. Violet Tweedale, whose courage in making public the result of her own remarkable psychic faculties should meet with recognition from every student of the subject. Our descendants will hardly realize the difficulty which now exists of getting first-hand evidence with names attached, for they will have outgrown the state when the cry of fake and fraud and dupe is raised at once against any observer, however honorable and moderate, by people who know little or nothing of the subject. Mrs. Tweedale says, now quoting Mrs. Tweedale, I had a wonderful little experience some 5 years ago, which proved to me the existence of fairies. One summer afternoon, I was walking alone along the avenue of Lupton House in Devonshire. Devonshire. It was an absolutely still day, not a leaf moving, and all nature seemed to sleep in the hot sunshine. A few yards in front of me, my eye was attracted by the violent movements of a single long, blade-like leaf of a wild iris. This leaf was swinging and bending energetically while the rest of the plant was motionless. Expecting to see a field mouse astride it, I stepped very abruptly up to it. What was my delight to see a tiny green man. He was about 5 inches long and was swinging back downwards. His tiny green feet, which appeared to be green-booted, were crossed over the leaf, and his hands raised behind his head, and held the blade. I had a vision of a merry little face and something red in the form of a cap on the lead. For a full minute he remained in view, swinging on the leaf. Then he vanished. Since then I have several times seen a single leaf moving violently while the rest of the plant remained motionless, but I have never again been able to see the cause of the movement. Here, the dress of the fairy, green jacket, and red cap, is exactly the same as was described independently by Baring Gould's son, and again we have the elements of heat and stillness. It may be fairly answered that many artists have drawn the fairies in such a dress, and that the colors may in this way have been impressed upon the minds of both observers. In the bending iris we have something objective, however, which cannot easily be explained away as a cerebral hallucination, and the whole incident seems to me an impressive piece of evidence. So, Arthur Conan Doyle then goes on to give his brief opinion of the Secret Commonwealth, of course a favorite here. In wrapping up, one of the best of the ancient accounts is that of Reverend R. Kirk, who occupied a parish at Monteith on the edge of the Highlands and wrote a pamphlet called The Secret Commonwealth about the year 1680. He had very clear and definite ideas about these little creatures, as he was by no means a visionary, but a man of considerable parts, who was chosen afterwards to translate the Bible into Erse. I don't know that. His information about fairies tallies very well with that of the Welshman quoted above. He slips up in imagining that flint arrowheads are indeed fairy bolts, but otherwise his contentions agree very well with our modern instances. They have tribes and orders according to the Scottish clergyman. They eat, they converse in a thin, whistling sort of language. They have children, deaths, and burials. They are fond of frolic dancing. They have a regular state and polity, with rulers, laws, quarrels, and even battles. They are irresponsible creatures, not hostile to the human race unless they have reason to be angry, but even inclined to be helpful, since some of them, the brownies, are by universal tradition ready to aid in the household work in the family, if the family is known how to engage their affection. So I think that sums up where we sit with any opinions regarding the UK tradition, which is one of, I don't think the pygmy theory explains it all. There are too many instances that run up into contemporaries of these authors that lead me to believe that something is an ongoing phenomenon. But that said, this conversation about it never went anywhere. There wasn't any theory advanced beyond the pygmy theory that rational people would say that's a reasonable explanation.
Aside from the sunstroke, whatever, the hallucination.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is that sums up or ends the UK section. If you have any overall thoughts on that, we can talk about it for a little bit. But if not, I'm happy to move into a couple short articles that are scientific articles from, say, the past, that are 21st century.
Well, I do think it's interesting that, that, like you were saying at the beginning there, that the guy from Sacred Text was mentioning that Arthur Conan Doyle basically ruined his reputation. And it's all about those photos, right? These photos that were faked, like he fell for it. And so he writes this long, all of his thoughts down on this entire phenomenon, and people basically just dismissed it because of these photos, this one case. And this is similar across many different paranormal things. Like with UFOs, it happens. Like if a person, a researcher, really gets behind a certain case and it turns out it was a hoax and they fell for it, it can ruin them. And people use it to dismiss the entire phenomena. right? Oh, those pictures were fake. The whole thing is fake. Anybody who falls for any of this is a fool. It's explained away as like ancient pygmies or hallucinations, or people are just making fraud. They're just so. It is an interesting and kind of sad for Conan Doyle the way that came out, the way that it worked out there. It's interesting to me because I years ago I went through this whole thing reading like, okay, so he, people respected him, and then he went into this whole fairy thing and then just destroyed himself. And it seems to me based on that one case with the photographs.
Yeah, it is. In fact, because if you listen to the words he said and the arguments he was making, there's nothing inflammatory there, nothing provocative. All he was pretty much saying was like, it seems to involve children, and there seems to be something related to the heat and stillness, but I still don't think that explains everything.
Right.
That's all he's saying.
Yeah.
But he happened to say this one piece of evidence was valid, and it's like, oh, well, and it's when you're standing outside the normative paradigm, it's very easy to have a straw man attached to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Strawmans that's the sort of clothing that outsiders, it fits them,
Yeah.
So.
It's also just sort of a version of the fallacy of composition, where somebody will take a large body of work, pull out one piece and say, this has been proven wrong, and thus we can dismiss everything. Right. So it's
and I don't know the logical fallacies poster as well as you do, but there might be one too, of the whole, the whole idea with Conan Doyle is like, oh, there's one bit of evidence that we can now disprove. I bet the rest of it evidence is nonsense too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
like,
yes.
Is that all composition?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the better fallacies. You can get it right there. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think I've got 3, maybe 4 articles that are all fairly short. So we should be able to cut up into segments fine. Right. So this first one is the title of it, Hobbit was a dwarf with large feet, from nature.com, 2009,
all right.
by author Rex Dalton. Great name, Rex Dalton. Good name. All right. So, quoting the article in full, studies suggest Flores man was a distinct species. From head to toe, the bones of a meter-tall species dating from somewhere between 17,000 and 95,000 years ago continue to reveal the potential complexities of human evolution. 2 articles published in Nature today focus on Homo Floresiensis. One describes how its brain could have dwarfed to its unusually small size, the other how its large feet, similar to those of chimps, would have allowed it to walk efficiently but probably not to run well on 2 legs. Quote, it was a fascinating specimen, a combination of puzzling features never seen together before, says Jeremy De Silva, a paleoanthropologist at, Worcester, probably, State College in, it's Massachusetts, Worcester, who wasn't involved in the research. It's probably Worcester. All right. Discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores in 2003 and dubbed the Hobbit after it was reported in 2004, the species triggered a worldwide debate about its origins. In particular, a hardcore cadre of critics said that the skeleton was that of a human who was suffering from microcephaly, a disorder in which the head is much smaller than normal, limiting its brain to, 417 cubic centimeters. That doesn't help me. A third the size of the average human brain. Good. The team, hailing from Indonesia and Australia, that discovered the bones argued that the species' brain had probably shrunk owing to its isolation on an island with sparse resources, a phenomenon experienced by other insular animals. Now, Eleanor Weston and Adrian Lister of London's Natural History Museum have used brain scaling data from extinct species of dwarf Madagascan hippopotamuses to show how the hobbit's brain could easily have reached its proportions. And William Youngers of Stony Brook University in New York and his colleagues report that analysis of the near-complete left foot and parts of the right foot indicate that the animal derives from a more primitive species that was previously believed. Compelling evidence? Daniel Lieberman, a Harvard University Harvard University biological anthropologist, called the results considerable evidence that Homo Floresiensis is a bona fide species. But Robert Martin, a biological anthropology curator at the Field Museum in Chicago, who maintains that the hobbit's brain couldn't have shrunk from a human relative, remains unconvinced by the hippo article. I think that claim goes too far, based as it is on a single case relying on indirect evidence, he told H News.
Whoa,
Notes that whatever the view of paleo...
Hold on a second. You broke up real bad right there. Can you repeat the last sentence you started with? Yeah.
Sure. So we were quoting this article. Quotes like, the internet connection is on... Sorry. This article quotes like 5 different people from different academic places, one after the other. It's kind of a pain. But okay. So that one was Robert Martin from the Field Museum in Chicago, who is unconvinced. He says, I think that claim goes too far, based as it is on a single case relying on indirect evidence.
Right. Okay.
De Silva notes that whatever the view of paleoanthropologists, the work by Youngers and his colleagues offers valuable glimpses of early bones seldom seen. Feet are important because they are crucial to understanding locomotion. In the case of Homo Floresiensis, Younger says, it is a real mosaic of primitive and derived features. The foot was long in relation to lower limb length, he says. The big toe was in line with other toes, but it was short, whereas the other toes were long. No human on Earth has proportions like that, he says. Because of these characteristics, he adds, Homo floresiensis would have been adept at walking, but not a good runner. He adds that features suggest that Homo floresiensis derived from either the earliest Homo erectus, which reached Southeast Asia by about 1.6 million years ago, or more primitive Homo habilis, thought to have arrived about 1.8 million years ago. To address the brain size debate, mammal paleontologists Weston and Lister examined about 50 skulls of 2 types of dwarf hippo, some of which lived as recently as about 1,200 years ago. The authors scaled brain mass to body mass in these species. By applying a model of this scaling, they determined that Homo floresiensis brain could have shrunk to about the size known from the lone skull. Whatever the explanation of the tiny brain of Homo floresiensis relative to its body size, the evidence presented here suggests that the phenomenon of insular dwarfism could have played a part in its evolution. Although Weston and Lister's study may not have convinced Martin, it was met with overwhelming enthusiasm by Youngers. The game is over, said Youngers. The evidence is overwhelming. But doubts still linger among those researchers. I know, right? Jesus. Still linger among those researchers who wonder how a species with such a little brain could make stone tools, hunt the island's pygmy elephants, and dodge its giant lizards. These paleoanthropologists believe any hobbit fossil discovered in the future will show that the species dwarfed rapidly from Homo sapiens, which first evolved more than 200,000 years ago in Africa rather than an earlier ancestor. In Indonesia, archaeologists Michael Morwood of the University of Wollongong, that is great, the University of Wollongong in New South Wales, Australia, and Thomas Satikna of National Research and Development Center of Archaeology in Jakarta, members of the team that originally unearthed Homo floresiensis, continued to excavate annually in the Liang Bua cave, which last summer yielded more Homo floresiensis bones and teeth. Attempts will probably be made to identify DNA in this material. Previous tests on teeth and bones have not yielded any. An expanded excavation schedule is planned. Okay. So we've got some evidence in the fossil record showing little people in the human record stretching back. And that earliest date mentioned, I believe, was 17,000 years ago.
Yeah.
That starts to be a time frame I could believe of stories hanging on.
Yes.
Of a prior people.
What do you mean? Early? I thought that was the late. I thought that was when they died, when they went.
Yeah, that would be that's what I was trying to say. The most recent. So there could be. I have no problem believing there are Homo sape cultures that would have existed alongside those humans. I guess.
Absolutely.
You know.
Right, but there's also,
and the stories could remain.
There's also an anthropologist I read. He wrote a fantastic long article. I read the whole thing on the show many episodes back. I don't remember which one it was, but he has spent years out there on that island talking to people and getting their stories. And he's just like, dude, the stories are too detailed and they describe exactly the the stuff that they're finding in the fossil evidence,
proportions and
the
all that.
proportions and everything, and all the characteristics that we're coming up with from the actual physical evidence we're finding, he's like, there's no way.
As recently as like 60 years ago, they had sightings.
Yeah, so he's just
Right.
like, these things, you know, they're not 17,000 years old in terms of when
Right.
they died out. They've been around long enough for modern people alive now to have seen them and actually report on them or whatever. So, you know, so there's an interesting overlap there. The questions I would have with that is like, what are they actually seeing? You know, I mean, if you want to go real paranormal, you could say, are they seeing like ghosts of these
Right.
entities? You know, is it spiritual in some way, some weird way? Is it really paranormal, or
No, I thought we ruled that out.
did we rule it out?
Yeah, like where are the dinosaur ghosts?
That's right. Yeah,
Right.
we've asked, where are the mammoth ghosts? It's like ghosts are recent, right? You know, you
That's
get
right.
you don't get you don't get a ghost of a Neanderthal, right?
The evidence is overwhelming that there are no ghosts.
We've ruled out the ghost, but yeah.
So
So
I guess you mentioned this. I was reading. I was trying to find something, but I thought there were megafaunal bones in the same site that they were digging up these
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they found. Are we going?
Oh, wait, megafauna bones in the same site?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's
Mega
definitely
mammals.
huge. There are definitely other bones in the same site. I don't know that. Yeah. Well, yeah, there are definitely other bones in the same site. In particular, definitely large lizards and birds and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what it's going to get into in the next couple articles. But
Yeah. So the idea.
I
that
didn't
this was
dig
like,
too far into this. Like you all touched on it before, and I didn't go digging into the Homo Floresiensis bit because I'm more interested in the storytelling part of it and the sort of interactions. But I wanted to definitely touch on it to show that, in particular, what's coming up. Some of the stories we have about little people do line up with what's in the fossil record.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There is some reason to say maybe the pygmy theory. It's very explainable. It was just these. Maybe it wasn't 17,000 years ago. Maybe some little people have survived up until more recently, and these experiences are all. I'm saying there is some evidence for that in the straight, normal, academic, nature.com. The next one's from phys.org.
Yeah.
I mean, straight-laced, normie sources. There's some evidence that there could be somewhat explainable.
yes, absolutely.
What we really need is a newspaper article from like the 1800s or something of a giant human skeleton with a tiny human skeleton in his belly. Like that he ate one.
I believe
You know,
you might be
stories that
describing.
the giants ate the little ones.
yeah.
I think you're actually describing Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think the little one inside.
Well, I have something else another point I want to make on this, but we got a break. It's time for a break, so we'll come back.
Hold on to that point.
Yeah, we'll hold on to the thought. We'll be right back, folks.
We are back, and Russ needs a beer. He's yawning. It's not your fault, Drew.
No, it's not.
No. Hey, Russ,
I
who's
think-
your
I
favorite
think you
adult
need to crack the
contemporary pianist?
What?
Who's your favorite adult contemporary pianist?
I don't have a favorite. Like
Is it Yanni?
Yanni.
Hey.
Hey, all right. All right.
Jeez. Well, you got a bunch of
All
records
right.
behind you. You know a bunch of musicians.
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
I could have never
that's
done
right.
that joke.
This is the guy. Like
just 'cause you
half of his responses in the Discord is like a music video.
Yeah,
That's all he
true.
does. You know, people will say all this stuff, and then he just responds with a music video. That's his response.
Yeah.
Genius.
You'd be amazed how many people have not heard "Bring On the Dancing Horses" by Echo and the Bunnymen. They all need to.
I
you
would
know, they all
not-
need to hear it.
I would not be surprised. I don't think.
All right.
Here.
So with
Yeah, Russ wins.
H. Floresiensis, let's see. I had another thing I wanted to say. Well, so that the thing that I have with these is like they don't seem like they would match the tales we're told about the Fae folk. At least not. Maybe some of them. Maybe they could have been a particular version of them, like because some of these creatures are, they're said to be
ethereal.
Well, I was just thinking like less intelligent. Like a lot of times the Fae are very clever.
How do they know How do they know how intelligent these skeleton?
They don't, but they're going on brain size.
Nah.
Yeah, which I guess if you have a 5 foot or a 5-inch tall little man, like was described in one of the stories, like it was shaking the leaf, like it's gonna have a tiny brain, right? So how can it be smart? But often these creatures are described as being extremely intelligent, wise, ancient, magical powers, whatever.
I don't think that they. I think that that's still a debated question, whether brain size.
Yeah,
I guess to a certain at a certain point it does.
Yeah,
but
well, yeah, I think it depends on whether or not you're in the standard model materialist reductionist or consciousness is a field out there that your brain is tapping into, or is it come from them? It depends on how you understand the relationship of consciousness to reality. I think.
Yeah,
I've heard it both ways.
How big are the brains of octopodes?
But the descriptions that we get from the people that lived there, talking about their encounters with these small people on the island, also describe them as crude. They don't have the same kind of, they would steal children, which is similar, but they're
like wild men.
Yeah. Like not as advanced as the people that lived there, even before they had modern tech. So it's just like, I don't know.
I mean, but that's also common amongst like different tribes.
That's true. Yeah.
People, different cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Throughout history.
Those guys are assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're dumb and they're assholes. Right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep.
It's just classic. We don't like them. They're dumb.
Yep. And they're short. Yeah. All right. Well, let's continue on with the evidence coming out of the Homo Floresiensis conversation. So the next article we have is entitled New Species of Pleistocene Stork Found on Hobbit Island from Phys.org. In 2010, author Lynn Edwards. Yeah. Local favorite, Phys.org.
Yeah. Physics' website.
What's that? Yeah. What's your favorite guy's name? Phil Plait or something? Is that him?
Phil Plait. Oh, yeah.
I bet he knows Lynn Edwards.
Our good buddy Phil Plait.
Good buddy. That's good stuff. All right. Here we go. Fossils of a giant Pleistocene stork found on Flores Island, Indonesia, belong to a new species, according to scientists. The now extinct bird was probably flightless and lived on the same island as Homo Floresiensis, a small hominin species that has come to be nicknamed the hobbit. The fragments of fossilized bones were found by Dr. Hanneke Meyer of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., and her colleague Rokus Dew, wow, great name, Rokus Dew, of the National Center for Archaeology in Jakarta, Indonesia. Dr. Meyer is a paleontologist specializing in fossils of birds found on islands. Okay. The giant stork fossils were located in sediments dated at 20 to 50,000 years ago in the Liang Bua cave, in which Homo floresiensis was found in 2004. Dr. Meyer said bird fossils are distributed throughout the sediments found in the cave and provide a unique opportunity to study how birds evolved in an insular environment, including their increasing size and loss of flight. Fossils of other giant species have also been found, including giant rats and lizards, but the island was also home to pygmy elephants as well as the hobbits. The extinct marabou stork, Leptoptilus robustus, was around 1.8 meters long and weighed about 16 kilograms, which makes it larger than modern stork species. It was probably capable of preying on juvenile hobbits, since the adult hobbits were only about 1 meter tall. But there is no evidence that it did. Modern marabou storks feed mostly on carrion meat, but they also eat small mammals, birds, fish, and frogs. Dr. Meyer said it is not unusual to find large birds on islands, especially if prey species are plentiful and mammalian predator species are scarce. But she said she had not expected to find a giant marabou stork on Flores. The size and weight of the bones suggests the stork was probably too heavy to fly, but it probably evolved from ancestors that flew to the isolated island and colonized it. Dr. Meyer said the island has always been isolated from other islands in the region and has never been connected to the mainland. She said the isolation had played an important role in shaping the evolution of the fauna on the island. It is not known why the giant and dwarf species on the island became extinct, but Dr. Meyer said all the fossils of the giant stork, the pygmy elephants, and hobbits were found in sediments beneath a layer of volcanic ash, which suggests a volcanic eruption may have caused a major extinction in the region. The findings, published in the Zoological Journal of Linnean Society, help explain how wildlife in the Pleistocene adapted to island life.
I like how we have this, there's the one species of the hominin that's shrinking because of the conditions on the island.
I know.
And then you've got the bird that's growing.
Yeah.
Right.
So big that
And
it
the
can't fly
hippopotamus is
anymore because of
shrinking.
the conditions on the island. It's like,
Right.
I love that too.
Interesting.
The elephants are tiny. The birds are giant.
Lizards are huge.
The lizards
Yeah.
are massive. The people are small.
Yeah.
Must have been
rats.
scarce resources on this island.
Yeah. Also, giant
Yeah.
rats.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do appreciate the combination of sentences back to back. It probably could have eaten the young ones because they were small, but there's no evidence that it did.
Right.
Modern ones do eat small mammals, birds, fish, and frogs, and it's like I think they probably did.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There's no evidence. In other words, they didn't find a hobbit skeleton inside of a stork skeleton.
Exactly.
There's no evidence.
Yeah. All right. One more straight science article. This one's from PBS.org. Giant Storks on Hobbit Island from 2010 by author Kate Becker. In Alien from Earth, which premiered back in 2008, Nova took viewers to the Indonesian island of Flores to meet the hobbits, or rather, the 18,000-year-old bones of the creatures formerly designated Homo Floresiensis. These diminutive hominids, which might or might not represent a lost human species, were not the only exotic fauna on ancient Flores. They shared the island with Komodo dragons, dwarf elephants called pygmy stegodon, and scientists announced earlier this week, giant carnivorous storks. To anyone who associates storks with the delivery of sweetly bundled little babies, the whole carnivorous thing may come as a surprise. Yet the 19 known species of stork eat worms and bugs, but many also dine on small mammals and other birds. And the marabou stork, to which the New Flores behemoth is most closely related, has a particular taste for carrion. As the writers at the National Zoo point out, though, it's not picky. Marabou storks will eat just about any kind of animal, dead or alive. Modern marabous are they're dead by the end of it. Modern marabous are nearly 5 feet tall, and their Flores cousins stood even taller. At 6 feet, they would have towered over the 3-foot hobbits. Based on the heft of the bones, which were discovered in the same cave which held the hobbit remains, the birds probably weighed about 35 pounds and didn't do much flying. Take vulnerable hobbits, throw in some giant meat-eating storks, give it all a good shake in the science headline machine, and what do you get? Frodo eaten alive by storks. And some storks deliver babies. These storks eat them. I'm exaggerating, but only a little. Since there is no evidence that these giant storks fed on the hobbits of Flores, the fact that almost every headline on the story screamed hobbit-eating storks seemed a little sensational. I emailed Mike Morwood. I think he was actually referenced in the first article. The Australian archaeologist who headed up the team that discovered the hobbit bones to get his take. To my surprise, Morwood sided with the hobbit eaters. Undoubtedly, so this is quoting Morwood, undoubtedly, Komodo dragons and possibly giant storks occasionally killed and consumed hobbits. In fact, Komodo dragons still occasionally kill people. End quote.
Yeah.
But, says Morwood, the storks were probably more afraid of hobbits than the hobbits were of them. There is clear evidence, this is quoting him again, there is clear evidence that Homo Floresiensis was butchering and eating this stork. Bones have cut marks on them, and one skull had been smashed. This should not be surprising, however, because other items of hobbit diet included Komodo dragon, another formidable predator, and lots of pygmy stegodon. All great accomplishments for a hominin just 1 meter tall. Despite her small brain, Hobbit was smarter than Big Bird. As for the suggestion that the storks nibbled the hobbits to extinction, says Morwood, we now have evidence that hominins, presumably of the lineage that culminated in Homo Floresiensis, were on Flores for at least 1 million years. Man. So it is very unlikely that storks or Komodo dragons were responsible for their extinction. So why are the creatures of Flores so weird? Animals on remote islands often grow or shrink over many generations, isolation being evolution's answer to Alice in Wonderland's magical cakes and mushrooms. Also, just me jumping in here, magical mushrooms can be the answer to the magical mushrooms, but okay. Naturally, big fellas like hippos and elephants are most likely to shrink down to pygmy proportions, perhaps so that they can survive on limited resources. Small fries like rodents swell up like hairy hulks, perhaps to better defend their territory and devour large prey. So that's why.
I love this. I love this idea that, like all over the rest of the world, the human race is dealing with enormous megafauna, and on this island, people have shrunk down and they're fighting shrunken elephants, like they're hunting their own version, the Hobbit elephant, and actual dragons.
So, I mean, these Homo Floresiensis is hunting. So this is not. We're not dealing with like something that's more similar to a chimpanzee, right? Do they hunt? Do they hunt other mammals? I don't know. I associate them with bananas, folks. I can't help it. But yeah, so I was like thinking like they're hunting elephants. This is
birds.
A sophisticated hominid.
And he said the bones have cut marks. That is not.
Right.
That
They're
is
butchering
animals.
animals.
That's a tool using. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to go there and find an arrowhead made by those. The Hobbit arrowheads.
Yeah, and in this case, the whole the Reverend Kirk idea that these
the
arrowheads are made by the little people is correct.
Right.
Maybe did they have stone tool? I don't know. We got to go there. Check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would like to fight one of these birds. We should fight a bird.
We should definitely fight a stork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got stork fights there? I mean,
absolutely.
Can we get in on that? I want to know what they went through.
The thing I've taken away from the Homo Floresiensis is that the reality of everyday life for that. So Homo Floresiensis, that human species, subspecies, however you want to categorize it, I don't care. That reality every day is very different than the one I've ever lived in. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I can imagine life as a hunter-gatherer in the regular world as it's been existing for the past 1,000 years or whatever. I can't imagine that life. That's fairy tale land. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
I would be more worried about the giant rats.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
God.
And the lizards. I mean, dude.
And the lizards. Like, man. Yeah.
I mean, Komodo dragons are no joke for regular people. If you were only 3 feet tall, snakes with legs. Yeah.
I'm just saying. Look, imagine you and all your crew and your hunting crew, and you're going out Komodo dragon hunting to bring down. Can you imagine the situation where you've circled a Komodo dragon and you're all trying to get a good shot, and then the storks show up? You know, and now you're in this like everybody's. It's like, you know. Every little person for themselves. I don't know.
But you were gonna point out that like these stories about the little people being at war with the birds.
Oh yeah, right. Sorry, we didn't actually touch on that. Little people are at war with the birds. Little people at war with birds. We started this whole conversation with the ancient Greeks talking about that, and it sounded nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Sure, there were little people fighting a bunch of cranes. I bet there were. You fast forward a few hundred years, 1,000 years, and you get PBS.org telling me, there were an ancient species of little people, and they had a centuries-long war with birds.
With giant birds, yes.
With giant birds. Like, that's crazy talk.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
That's great. I wonder if it's possible Is it possible? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't want to.
Are we going ancient archaeology here?
Is it possible that the Greeks somehow got some of the stories from the people who lived on this island?
Right. Oh, I thought we were going to...
Yeah, so that was my thought. Okay, you've either got that the Greeks, through some telephone game or psychedelic Akashic record or just cultural inheritance, heard these stories because they were so impactful to the people that experienced it, right?
Yeah.
So that it was, the incidents are isolated in location, but the stories go out. Fine. The other option is that what has been discovered on Homo Floresiensis wasn't just at Homo Floresiensis. What had happened, wasn't just on Flores Island.
Yeah.
If it was if that was, I mean, this could have been the norm.
Yes. If there were
in whole swaths of continents.
Right. It does seem like the fact that we have H. Floresiensis opens the door to the possibility of real little people, dwarf people, like actual whole tribes of them living elsewhere on the planet, not just on that island. And during the Pleistocene and up more into the Holocene.
No. They would have been normal size.
Because they weren't on an island?
They weren't on an island.
Yeah.
The birds couldn't fly.
But there were other giant birds. But you're right.
But no, I agree with you.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, this is one of those deals where, like, okay, if they're here, they can be elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, and maybe they all were at war with the birds.
Right. We can't rule it out. We now have surprisingly more evidence that that's true than we did a week ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. The Greeks.
All right.
They knew what they were talking about.
Yeah. One more, I think. Yeah. One more from this little section. I may skip that last one. But this is okay. You've got Homo Floresiensis. That's on the island of Flores. There are then these stories, these local stories of the Ebu Gogo, right? And so the Ebu Gogo is the name of the sort of little person entity that's running around on the island doing things. And so a lot of people are saying, oh, these stories and myths of the Ebu Gogo obviously are just tied back to the little people that used to live on the same island. Look, we can draw this comparison from the little people who used to live here. And so they used to live here and the stories have lasted. Okay. So that is something that lots of people have drawn as a conclusion, drawing from the Pygmy theory and Macritian people like that. This is an article that I found was absolutely fantastic that really takes that to task and does a great job. So this is the title of this is Investigating Homo Floresiensis and the Myth of the Ebu Gogo. And it's from something called Aeon.com, AEON. I'd never heard of that, so I just went ahead and looked up what it is. 2012, Aeon was established as a unique digital magazine, publishing some of the most profound and provocative thinking on the web. We ask big questions. This is their PR. We ask big questions to find the freshest, most original answers provided by leading thinkers on science, philosophy, society, and the arts. That's not a plug. I don't care if anybody ever reads their stuff. I'm just saying that's what they say they are because I've never heard of them. So anyway, this article is by the author is Paige Madison, graduate student at the Institute of Human Origins at Arizona State. Published February 3rd of 2020. So at the very least, it's an academic, an academic human writing it. So, all right. An ancient legend from the Indonesian island of Flores speaks of a mysterious wild grandmother of the forest who eats everything, the Ebu Gogo. According to folklore, such tiny, hairy people as her once roamed the tropical forest alongside modern humans, eating crops and sometimes even human flesh. For decades, ethnographers documented the tale, recording details of the Ebu Gogo's mumbling speech to her long, pendulous breasts, all while assuming the story was simply a myth. The legend became viewed in an entirely new light, however, when the bones of an equally small, previously unknown species of human relative was discovered deep in a cave on the very same island. The 2004 announcement of a new branch on the human evolutionary tree was astonishing, to say the least. Standing just over a meter tall, the hominin labeled Homo Floresiensis had a small brain, the apparent ability to make arduous water crossings, and seemingly honed skills in making stone tools. Much of the species' anatomy looked primitive, yet evidence of their behavior indicated an advanced human-like being. The hominin was so seemingly mythical that the research team drew from J.R.R. Tolkien's fictional world for its nickname, the Hobbit. Arguably, the strangest aspect of the diminutive hominid story was the suggestion that they survived into the recent past, roaming the tropical forests and ancient volcanoes as recently as 12,000 years ago. Not only was this date surprising because it is a time when scientists believed that Homo sapiens were alone on the planet, but also because it was long after the arrival of modern humans in the area. Tens of thousands of years after, in fact. Had hobbits lived alongside our own species for all that time? Associations between the Ebugogo and Homo Floresiensis arose immediately after the media hobbit frenzy broke. From news headlines to scientific meetings, people wondered, could these two creatures be one and the same? Had the locals been imagining mythical wild people of the forest or merely reporting on them? Perhaps the seemingly fictitious legend had an empirical basis all along. While the media ran with the idea, some scientists too entertained it, feeling hope that the legend could suggest that a living, breathing Homo Floresiensis could still be found on some remote part of the island today. The proposed connection between the bones and the myth raised an interesting question, one that is being explored by anthropologists in other parts of the world. How far back in time can oral traditions accurately report events? Some scientists studying indigenous memory have suggested that oral traditions contain extraordinarily reliable records of real events occurring thousands of years ago. Where then are the boundaries between legend, memory, myth, and science? Had the people of Flores preserved an oral record of Homo Floresiensis? The ethnographer who originally documented the tale of Ebugogo, Gregory Forth of the University of Alberta in Canada, argued that anthropologists are too inclined to dismiss folk categories as products of the imagination, while others pointed to the many correlations that existed between the description of the Ebugogo and Homo Floresiensis. Both were described as having long arms, for example, and being small in stature. Many were intrigued by the extreme detail of the legend. Surely the vivid description of the pendulous breasts that the Ebugogo allegedly threw over her shoulders must be compelling. Forth even lamented that the dimensions of female breasts is, unfortunately, one of the many things that cannot be gauged from paleontological evidence. From the beginning there were, however, weak links in the proposed connection between the prehistoric bones and the mythical legend. To begin with, the two concepts exist in entirely different regions of Flores. The category of Ebugogo belongs to the Nage people, who reside more than 100 kilometers away from the Homo Floresiensis discovery site at Liangbua, across treacherous mountains and thick jungle forests. The Hobbit Cave is instead home to the culturally and linguistically distinct people known as the Mangari. While it is not unimaginable that Homo Floresiensis could have roamed the landscape, it is suspicious that Ebugogo is not a Mangari invention. A quick glance across the archipelago also reveals that stories of small forest creatures are not unique to Flores, which is perhaps unsurprising given that the area is rife with living human-like primates. The well-known orang pendek of nearby Sumatra, for example, are thought to be accounts of orangutans. While Flores has no orangutans, there are plenty of macaques. Yet these holes didn't stop the discussion of Ebugogo from recurring. Expeditions endeavored to find still living wild men, hoping to gaze in their bestial eyes. Local villagers, too, began reporting having killed them. A mockumentary inspired by real-life scientific discovery, The Cannibal in the Jungle, told the story of a cannibalized murder in the forest, blamed on a foreign researcher who was being vindicated only after the discovery of Floresiensis and the realization that the crime had been committed by Ebugogo. Playing with fact and fiction, it mixed genuine footage from the Hobbit excavations with eccentric actors and fake newspaper headlines. The film even features interviews with real scientists and experts, whose comments about the exceptional fossil discovery were woven into the fictional narrative. The myth persisted even as real scientists scoffed, but eventually holes in the Ebugogo Homo Floresiensis Association were too large to be ignored. Each expedition in search of a reported sighting revealed an empty cave or else a macaque. New species of scientific evidence have also made the connection increasingly implausible, especially a revision of the dating that moved the Hobbit's disappearance to almost 50,000 years ago. To experts, Ebugogo was about as real as the Tooth Fairy. So what then are we to make of the legend of the Ebugogo? Why are we so captivated by the idea of ancient wild men of the forest? Some culpability lies in the bones themselves. Over the past couple of decades, with paleoanthropology changing rapidly, discoveries such as Homo Floresiensis have overturned basic assumptions about the past. One example is the shifting realization that the picture of hominin diversity during our own species' time on this planet was much more crowded and entangled than previously believed, a notion brought on largely by Homo Floresiensis and since added to by additional discoveries. Maybe the significance of the intertwined stories of Homo Floresiensis and Ebugogo, then, is the realization that scientific discoveries, particularly the unexpected ones, have the power to transform the way we think. By confronting scientists with something so unforeseen, these small bones opened the door to big speculation. Homo Floresiensis revealed that the past was more bizarre than we imagined, full of evolutionary hodgepodges, unexpected migrations, and life in surprising places. And while the legend of Ebugogo failed to echo paleoanthropological reality, such botched connections are not always the case. Researchers from geology to paleontology turned to folklore, and events from volcanic eruptions to fossil discoveries have shown that science has something to gain from engaging with legend. Even the fabled creatures with a lion's body and an eagle's beak, introduced to Greek travelers as the griffin, was largely grounded in encounters with dinosaur bones. The interplay between science and myth has become ever more complex and more interesting. After all, if hobbits once lived on a remote Indonesian island, what else was once possible?
Yeah. Yep, that's a good ending there.
Yeah. So that's just kind of a brief aside, not really a brief aside exactly, but I wanted to talk about the fact that there are bones that point to little people. I don't think we can have a conversation about little people with all the storytelling and not include the fact that there are some bones, and those bones then oddly corroborate with the whole bird thing, which I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
And so there is something there. And, you know, this is Snake Bros, Randall Carlson, Younger Dryas. We all, like, everything was rewritten 12,000 years ago. Yeah. Like, if the whole surface of the earth is rewritten, if 4 species of pachyderm, if all these megafauna become extinct in the North American continent, ascertaining what reality must have been like for other branches of it's so hard to imagine what that world would have been like. And I also don't have a problem believing that whole elements of that reality survived in storytelling in the cultures that survived. And so you're talking about, what do you do when reality fundamentally shifts, but you want to hold on to the stories of the past? They become stories, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about that bit in the article there where it says they've pushed the date of the extinction of H. floresiensis back to 50,000 years? I thought I remembered seeing elsewhere that was thought for a while, but then they moved it back up.
That was my thought. I don't know if that's held.
Yeah. And again, I have to say,
right, like, in the first paragraph on Wikipedia, 50,000 years ago.
Yeah. So they moved it back to 50,000. But that again,
until the arrival of modern humans, it was on. That's what they say.
That's what they're pushing it back.
I wonder if
so they're pushing it back.
That's why they moved it back.
Yeah, I know. It's like modern humans and these guys were not cohabiting the island. But again, I'll just bring up that anthropologist guy that I read his whole article on, and this was like, I mean, it had to have been within a year ago that this guy wrote this article, and he's just like, dude, I've spent all this time out there. It isn't just this one legend of the Ebugogo. You know, he says these people have too many descriptions of this thing that fit. So at least that guy is not, he hasn't changed his opinion that the people there in some way are preserving stories and also describing encounters, modern encounters, you know?
Yeah.
All right, check this out.
You know, the other thing I want to point out is, like, I love that these academics think, well, you know, we've walked these forests and we didn't see any evidence. Like, yeah, bro, you live in the, you know, the halls of academe. You're not out in the forest, like, learning how to hide, you know? You don't have generational knowledge of how to keep your entire tribe hidden from modern humans and fighting birds and stuff. Like, you think you're going to find them if they don't want to be found and they live in the forest and you don't? No, you're not going to find them.
Sure, the conditions of this island were such that it forced all species living here to adapt very quickly like nowhere else on Earth. But I'm it's no problem for me. Look, I got my boots. I got my coat.
Right.
I signed all the paperwork for the visa. I'm here to do the research, people. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is from Wikipedia under culture on the Homo Floresiensis page. The cave that they found the bones in yielded over 10,000 stone artifacts, mainly lithic flakes. Surprising considering H. Floresiensis' small brain. This has led some researchers to theorize that H. Floresiensis inherited their tool-making skills from H. erectus. Points, perforators, blades, and microblades were associated with remains of the extinct elephant relative Stegodon, and were probably hafted into barbs to sink into the elephant. This indicates the inhabitants were targeting juvenile Stegodon. Similar artifacts are found at the So Basin, 50 kilometers to the south, associated with Stegodon and Komodo dragon remains, and are attributed to a likely ancestral population of Homo erectus. While it was initially suggested that H. Floresiensis was capable of using fire, the supporting evidence for this claim was later found to be unreliable. So they're like, I don't know.
Oh, so they could make arrowheads, but they couldn't make fire.
That
Man
is, in my opinion, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like,
We're gonna make stone tools, lithics, and we're gonna hunt down these elephants or whatever. But we can't cook the food.
That's what I was going to say. What are you butchering the birds for?
Yeah.
If not to then
To not make.
Cook
I mean,
it.
you're gonna make chicken, bro. Yeah.
That's right. I was going to say, because I mean, genuinely, though.
I did
seriously.
not realize they pushed the date back that far. I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, we need to look into
read
that.
into this. Is this? I've always found
I
this
bet that-
fascinating too. This study, but
I bet roasted whatever huge stork. I bet it's really good.
It's
I bet
probably
it
really
is
good. It probably is
really
good.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I
you
wanna-
get one of those. That's feeding the whole crew.
I want to
you
know.
know?
Yeah, like, dude, roasted stork and midget mammoth. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. I like my Komodo dragon medium rare.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can take another break.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. We'll be right back. This is great. Modern evidence for little people, maybe. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, folks, we are back. Second half of the show. We've been discussing H. Floresiensis in this excellent amount of research that Drew has done on the little people. And are we continuing in this vein, or is it you changing? What's happening next here, Drew?
We're changing veins.
Okay,
Russ.
we're changing veins.
We're changing veins. Right vein, wrong arm.
Right.
So we're
Different
now
needle.
moving. That's right. We are now moving back into the fun stuff of storytelling. So we are going back into stories of little people. But this section is all going to be, it's global. I mean, realistically, I only really speak the one language. So in tracking down resources for this sort of thing, I was pretty much beholden to what was already translated into English or what were written by English authors or English speaking authors as they traveled and lived elsewhere. But I've got a decent section here with a fair amount of stories from around the world. Polynesian to all the way to South America, Central America, Mexico. So we're going to plow through those. The first, if anybody is in the future listening to this that happened in the past and they're reading the document along, because it may happen, there's a section, or there's one whole article I'm going to skip here. It is from ancientorigins.net, and it's just an overall of there being little people stories from around the world. But because we're going to be talking about that for some time, I'll just let it roll. But Skara Brae, the Orkney Islands, let's see, the Menehune of Hawaii, which we're going to mention, Hawaiian archaeology, the Orang Pendek, Obscure Indonesian megalithic sites, the Flores little people, Homo Floresiensis. Those are all the little subheadings within that. So it's just sort of an overview of the sort of thing we're going to talk about for a whole segment. But I just want to mention that is there. Ancientorigins.net also has a bunch of other great things. So if you're looking to read some stuff, go take a look.
Yeah, Ancient Origins is a great site.
Yeah. All right, but moving back into the real published materials as close as we can get to sort of first-hand myths from going around the world. So we're moving outside of the Western tradition and into other parts of the global cultural traditions. So this first book from 1854, entitled Polynesian Mythology and Ancient Traditional History of the New Zealanders as Furnished by Their High Priests and Chiefs. So this is by Sir George Grey. He was a British soldier, explorer, colonial administrator, and writer. Sir George, served in a succession of governing positions: governor of South Australia, twice governor of New Zealand, governor of Cape Colony, and the 11th premier of New Zealand. He played a key role in the colonization of New Zealand, both the purchase and annexation of Maori land. He was born in Lisbon, Portugal, but a few days after his father was killed in a battle. So he's educated in England. Despite being less hands-on than his predecessor, his fiscally responsible measure ensured the colony was in good shape by the time he departed for New Zealand in 1845. So anyway, 1854 is when he collects this. All that to say, he's, high-ranking British military. So take that for what it's worth. But he's getting this from the people living locally. So the chapter titled "The Art of Netting," learned by Kahukura from the fairies, quoted in full here. All right. Once upon a time, a man of the name of Kahukura wished to pay a visit to Rangawiya, a place lying far to the northward, near the country of the tribe called Te Rarawa. Whilst he lived in his own village, he was continually haunted by a desire to visit that place. At length, he started on his journey and reached Rangawiya, and as he was on his road, he passed a place where some people had been cleaning mackerel, and he saw the inside of the fish lying all about the sand on the seashore. Surprised at this, he looked about at the marks and said to himself, "Oh, this must have been done by some of the people of the district." But then he came to look a little more knowingly at the footmarks. He saw that the people who had been fishing had made them in the nighttime, not that morning, nor in the day. And he said to himself, "These are no mortals who have been fishing here. Spirits must have done this. Had they been men, some of the reeds and grass which they sat on in their canoe would have been lying about." He felt quite sure from several circumstances that spirits or fairies had been there, and after observing everything well, he returned to the house where he was stopping. He, however, held fast in his heart what he had seen as something very striking to tell all his friends in every direction, and as likely to be means of gaining knowledge which might enable him to find out something new. So that night, he returned to the place where he had observed all these things, and just as he reached the spot, back had come the fairies too, to haul their net for mackerel, and some of them were shouting out, "The net here! The net here!" Then a canoe paddled off to fetch the other in which the net was laid, and as they dropped the net into the water, they began to cry out, "Drop the net in the sea at Rangawiya, and haul it to Mamaku." Those words were sung out by the fairies as an encouragement in their work and from the joy of their hearts at their sport in fishing. As the fairies were dragging the net to the shore, Kahukura managed to mix amongst them and hauled away at the rope. He happened to be a very fair man, so that his skin was almost as white as that of the fairies, and from that cause he was not observed by them. As the net came close in to the shore, the fairies began to cheer and shout, "Go out into the sea, and some of you, in front of the rocks, lest the net should be tangled at Tawatatuia by Tuatatuia." Man, I'm sorry about that. That is tough. Lest the net should be tangled. Okay. For that was the name of a rugged rock standing out there they named the damn rocks. Okay, that was the name of a rugged rock standing on the sandy shore. The main body of the fairies kept hauling at the net, and Kahukura pulled away in the midst of them. When the first fish reached the shore, thrown up in the ripple driven before the net as they hauled it in, the fairies had not yet remarked Kahukura, for he was almost as fair as they were. It was just at the very first peep of dawn that the fish were all landed, and the fairies ran hastily to pick them up from the sand and to haul the net up on the beach. They did not act with their fish as men do, dividing them into separate loads for each, but every one took up what fish he liked and ran a twig through their gills, and as they strung the fish, they continued calling out, "Make haste, run here, all of you, and finish the work before the sun rises." Kahukura kept on stringing his fish with the rest of them. He had only a very short string and making a slip knot at the end of it. When he had covered the string with fish, he lifted them up, but had hardly raised them from the ground when the slip knot gave way from the weight of the fish, and off they fell. Then some of the fairies ran good-naturedly to help him to string his fish again, and one of them tied the knot at the end of the string for him. But the fairy had hardly gone after knotting it before Kahukura had unfastened it, and again tied a slip knot at the end. Then he began stringing his fish again, and when he had a great many upon them, he lifted them, and off they slipped as before. This trick he repeated several times, and delayed the fairies in their work by getting them to knot his string for him and put his fish on it. At last, full daylight broke, so that there was light enough to distinguish a man's face, and the fairies saw that Kahukura was a man. Then they dispersed in confusion, leaving their fish in their net and abandoning their canoes, which were nothing but stems of the flax. In a moment the fairies started for their own abodes. In their hurry, as had just been said, they abandoned their net, which was made of rushes, and off the good people fled as fast as they could go. Now was first discovered the stitch for netting a net, for they left theirs with Kahukura, and it becomes a pattern for him. He thus taught his children to make nets, and by them the Maori race were made acquainted with that art, which they now have known from very remote times. So, first of all, that didn't happen at night, in the heat of the day, in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
It happened the opposite.
Right.
So it happened at night, in the cool of the... But also, this is the most obvious of... This is a gifting of technology such that he learned how to make nets from that net and then taught his kids to make nets based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a story describing that coming from Polynesian.
Yeah, it's stolen. He tricked them, for sure.
He tricked them.
And it's also interesting because this is like one of the rare, or more, I feel like a more rare case where the human gets one over on the fae. You know.
Well, they were the night fae. They couldn't see very well.
Yeah.
The ones in broad daylight, they know.
Well,
they know you're not part of them.
Yeah.
We say get one over on the fae. Well, that does imply we know what the fae are after.
Yeah.
You know? That's that whole thing of like, if the goal is to seed technology, then they've merely set it up where it's like a good con. You know, you can't con an honest, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You have to get them to think that they're conning you. That's how you pull off the con.
Yep.
So, anyway.
Yeah. It's also interesting that there's this very specific, like these names you stumbled over, which I don't blame you. I'm looking at this. Tawa Tawawia by Tewa Tewuia. The names of these very specific names of these rocks.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting to me as well.
Yep.
And I wonder what the
probably translates to like devil's horn, or
it could be. Yeah. And I wonder what the name Kahukura means, if it has a meaning in their language.
The name of the place is mentioned a few times, Rangiawia.
Yeah.
Rangiawia. That's I wonder if that.
So it's just interesting. They're like it's a specific location, and here is a specific landmark, right? And then here's this specific tale where he tricks them so that he can learn how to make nets, and then like basically so that it's a very interesting implication.
Oh, and the nets are made of rushes.
Yeah.
Which was also brought up in the UK. They're always making things of rushes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. All right. Continuing on with a new work here. This is from the book Hawaiian Folk Tales by Thomas G. Thrum from 1907. This is just from sacredtext.com where I pulled it. This is an anthology of Hawaiian folklore, including pieces by Thomas Thrum and other writers. This includes many articles which were originally published in difficult-to-obtain journals and now rare books, all written in the late 19th or early 20th centuries, mostly based on first-hand oral traditions. So I think this one, this is a series of like short little accounts. So it'll be a few paragraphs at a time. But these are all stories of the Menehunes. I'm assuming it's Menehunes. Hawaii, the original home of the brownies, and that's his language. That's Thomas Thrum's language, is the original home of the brownies. So here we go. Students of Hawaiian folklore find much of coincident interest with traditional or more historic beliefs of other and older lands. The same applies in a measure to some of the ancient customs of the people. This is difficult to account for, more especially since the Hawaiians possessed no written language by which such knowledge could be preserved or transmitted. Fornander and others discovered in the legends of this people traces of the story of the flood, the standing still of the sun, and other narratives of Bible history, which some savants accept as evidence of their Aryan origin. This claim we are not disposed to dispute, but desire to present another line of tradition that has been neglected hitherto, yet has promise of much interest. It will doubtless interest some readers to learn that Hawaii is the real home of the brownies, or was, and that this adventurous nomadic tribe were known to the Hawaiians long before Swift's satirical mind conceived his Lilliputians. Or Lilliputians? Lilliputians, probably. It would be unreasonable to expect as so great a range of nationalities and peculiar characteristics among the pygmies of Hawaii as among the brownies of story. Tradition naturally represents them as of one race and all nimble workers, not a gentleman dude or policeman in the whole lot. Unlike the inquisitive and mischievous athletes of present fame, the original and genuine brownies, known as the Menehunes, are referred to as an industrious race. In fact, it was their alleged power to perform a marvelous amount of labor in a short space of time that has fixed them in the minds of Hawaiians, many of whom point to certain traces of their work in various parts of the islands to substantiate the traditional claim of their existence. Meeting thus with occasional references to this active race, but mostly in a vague way, it has been a matter of interesting inquiry among Hawaiians. Some of them were noted cow or legend bearers for further knowledge on the subject. Very naturally, their ideas differ respecting the Menehunes. Some treat the subject with gravity and respect and express the belief that they were the original inhabitants of these islands, but gradually gave way to the heavier-bodied ancestors of the present race. Others consider that the history of the race has been forgotten through the lapse of ages, while the more intelligent and better educated look upon the Menehunes as a mythical class of gnomes or dwarves, and the account of their exploits as having been handed down by tradition for social entertainment, as other people relate fairy stories. In the Hawaiian legend of Kumuhonua, Fornander states that the Polynesians were designated as the people, descendants from Menehune, son of Luanu, etc. It disappeared as a national name so long ago, however, that subsequent legends have changed it to a term of reproach, representing them at times as a separate race and sometimes as a race of dwarfs, skillful laborers, but artful and cunning. In the following account and selection of stories gathered from various native sources, as literal a rendition as possible has been observed by the translators for the better insight it gives of Hawaiian thought and character. All right. So, Russ is loving it, you can tell. All right. Moke Manu's account. The Menehunes were supposed to have been a wonderful people, small of stature and of great activity. They were always united in doing any service required of them. It was their rule that any work undertaken must be completed in one night, otherwise it must be left unfinished, as they did not labor twice on the same work. Hence the origin of the saying, He po hukahani awa uapua. In one night, yes, and by dawn it is finished. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all heard it.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Well, that's the answer to all the questions in your presentation, Russ.
Oh, yeah. How did they do this?
It was part of the magic.
Yeah.
It had to be done in one night.
It has to be done in one night.
When the sun rose, they were like, well,
yeah,
we're not going to flatten that wall
anymore.
It's
unfinished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just leave it pillowy.
Yeah.
There is no reliable history of the Menehunes. No one knows whence they came. Though tradition says they were the original people of the Hawaiian Islands, they are thought to have been supernatural beings, governed by someone higher in rank than themselves. whom they recognized as having power and authority over them. That assigned them to the mountains and hills where they lived permanently. They were said to be the only inhabitants of the islands up to the time of Papa and Wakia, and were invisible to everyone but their own descendants or those connected with them in some way. Many persons could hear the noise and hum of their voices, but the gift of seeing them with the naked eye was denied to those not akin to them. They were always willing to do the bidding of their descendants, and their supernatural powers enabled them to perform some wonderful works. All right. Ready for a few stories?
Yeah.
So I'll call this Pi. It could be P, it's P-I, but I'm going to go with Pi. Pi's watercourse. Pi was an ordinary man living in Waimea, Kauai, who wanted to construct a mano or dam across the Waimea River and a watercourse therefrom to a point near Kikiola. Having settled upon the best locations for his proposed work, he went up to the mountains and ordered all the Menehunes that were living near Pukupele to prepare stones for the dam and watercourse. The Menehunes were portioned off for the work, some to gather stones and others to cut them. All the material was ready in no time, and Pi settled upon the night when the work was to be done. When the time came, he went to the point where the dam was to be built, and he waited. At the dead of night, he heard the noise and hum of the voices of the Menehunes on their way to Kikiola, each of whom was carrying a stone. The dam was duly constructed, every stone fitting in its proper place, and the stone auai or watercourse also laid around the bend of Kikiola. Before the break of day, the work was completed, and the water of the Waimea River was turned by the dam into the watercourse on the flatlands of Waimea. When the work was finished, Pi served out food for the Menehunes, which consisted of shrimps, this being the only kind he had in sufficient quantity to supply each with a fish to himself. They were well supplied and satisfied, and at dawn returned to the mountains of Pukupele rejoicing, and the hum of their voice gave rise to the saying, shit. Wawake menehune I Pukupele makuai, puoho kamauno a koloko a kewaene ma kulapuako wahoo.
Wow. Wow.
The hum of the voices of the Menehunes at Pukupele, Kauai, startled the birds of the pond of Kuwane and Jesus. Okay. We're just going to move on. We're just going to move on from all that. The auai or watercourse of Pi is still to be seen at Kikiola. At one time, Pi also said the Menehunes to wall in a fish pond at the bend of the Hule River. They commenced work toward midnight, but at dawn the walls of the pond were not sufficiently finished to meet, so it was left incomplete and has remained so to this day.
There you go.
So there you go.
But okay, I'm a little confused here. Is this guy supposed to be Pi, one of their descendants? Right? Because previously we were
kind of got to be, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Because previously we were told like it's kind of treating him as separate from them. But we were told that like if you're not one of their descendants, you can't see them or interact with them at all. So he must be part.
Yep. And it also
like he
went up to the mountains and ordered all the Menehunes that were living near there to prepare the stones. That's all he did. He just ordered them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Pi does have a feeling like a bit of a mythical character too.
Yeah.
You know, that he did this and that and this and that. He built that, but then he'd also built this, and you know.
Right. They were always willing to do the bidding of their descendants, it says. And their supernatural powers enabled them to perform in some wonderful works. So he must be a descendant.
That must be right. That must be the implication. All right.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then, just keep moving here.
Yeah.
Kekupua's canoe. Oh, but there's a lot of names in this. I'm just going to try to rock and roll with them.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Kekupua's canoe. Keke, a chief, lived at Waihaewa, Kukanalioka, Waialaua, Oahu. I added a syllable in there, I'm sure of it. Okay, so Keke, a chief, lived on Oahu. Okay. One day, his wife told him that she desired to go in search of her brother, Kehenea Kekuaka, who was supposed to be living in Tahiti. That one I know, Tahiti. Keke thereupon ordered his man, Kakupua, to go into the woods and find a suitable tree to make a canoe for his wife for this foreign voyage. Kakupua, with a number of men under him, searched in the forest belt for these three things, as also through the woods of Kalua without success. From Kahana, they made a search through the mountains till they came to Kilohana in Kalihi Valley, and from there to this other town where they slept in a cave. If I stopped on all the words, the story would never
this
happen.
is great. Yeah,
really,
you're doing good.
In the dead of night, they heard the hum as of human voices, but were unable to discern any person, though the voices sounded close to them. At dawn, silence reigned again, and when the sun arose, lo and behold, there stood a large mound of stones, the setting of which resembled that of a temple, the remains of which are said to be noticeable to this day. So, Kakupua and his men returned to their chief and reported their unsuccessful search for a suitable tree for the desired canoe, and related also the incident at Walani. Keke, being a descendant of the Menehunes, knew immediately the authors of the strange occurrence. He therefore instructed Kakupua to proceed to those towns and to stay there till the night of Cain, then to go to another town and wait till hearing the hum and noise of the Menehunes, which would be the signal of their finishing the canoe. And thus it was, the Menehunes, having finished the canoe, were ready to pull it to the sea. He directed them to look sharp, and two men would be noticed holding the ropes at the head of the canoe. One of them would leap from one side to the other. He was the director of the work and was also called Pale. There would be some men farther behind holding the guiding ropes. They were the kahunas that superintended the construction of the canoe. He reminded them to remember these directions, and when they saw these men, to give them orders and show them the course to take in pulling the canoe to the sea. Kakupua followed all these instructions faithfully. He waited at Punue till dusk, when he heard a hum of as many voices, and proceeding farther up near the slope, he saw these wonderful people. They were like ordinary human beings, but diminutive. He directed them to pull the canoe along the ne, or farther side of the stream. But by this course, the canoe was brought down as far as Kala, near this other place, where, when daylight came, they left their burden and returned to Walani. The canoe was left in the ditch, where it remained for many generations, and was called Kakupua's canoe, in honor of the servant of the chief Keke. Thus, even with the help of the Menehunes, the wife of Keke was not satisfied in her desire.
That's weird.
It's very weird.
Yeah.
So a lot of very particular place names again that I was sort of stumbling with, but that does
it's very specific.
That is telling of, it's very specific to the place.
But I guess I get the idea. Like they were doing he followed all these directions, and they're dragging the canoe down, but they only made it to this specific spot. And then the daylight comes, and then their job is they won't finish the job, so the canoe stays there. But it's weird, like why now that it's made, you can't have normal people drag it all the way. It's interesting. It
also feels to me a bit like the copper kettle in the Scotty story, which is that thing of like, we have this artifact now as the result of this quirk of circumstances regarding the little people, and now here's this thing. Yeah,
here's a canoe in a ditch.
Yeah, here's a canoe.
No one's ever get way up on the mountains.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so one final couple of paragraphs. The Hiawi builders. Okay. The Menehunes are credited with the construction of numerous Hiawis, or ancient temples, in various parts of the islands. The Temple of Mukini near Kohala is, I pointed out, as an instance of their marvelous work. The place selected for the site of the temple was on a grassy plain. The stones in the nearest neighborhood were for some reason not deemed suitable for the work, so those of the valley, some 12 miles distant, were selected. Tradition says the Menehunes were placed in a line covering the entire distance from Palulu to Honuapu, whereby the stones were passed from hand to hand for the entire work. Work was begun at the quiet of night, and at cockcrow in the morning it was finished. Thus in one night the temple of Mukini was built. Another temple of their erection was at Hilo, the peculiarity of the work being that the stones had been brought together by the residents of that part of the district by direction of the chief, but that in one night the Menehunes gathered together and built it. The chief and his people were surprised on coming the next morning to resume their labors to find the temple completed. There stands on the Pali of Waikolo in Molokai a temple that Hawaiians believe to have been constructed by no one else than the Menehunes. It is on the top of a ledge in the face of a perpendicular cliff, with a continuous, inaccessible cliff behind it reaching hundreds of feet above. No one has ever been able to reach it either from above or from below, and the marvel is how the material, which appears to be seashore stones, was put in place.
Wow, I'd like to see this place.
No shit. But I just want to read out one of my notes of commentary. It said at the start of this, you may not remember, no written language among these people. So assuming that the authors of it are faithfully translating it as well as they're able, they're obviously writing in a little bit of their own language, and that's part of translation. But assuming they're trying to faithfully relay these stories, no written language, and the stories sound exactly like the land we come from. No wonder they wanted to publish it. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I mean, that's a Midsummer Night's Dream they're describing, folks.
Yeah.
I'm also fascinated by the built in one night thing. I
mean, built in one night.
How did this? It's just wild to think that so many places that. I mean, this is an island, you know, in the middle of nowhere, and they've got the same ideas. Like, oh yeah, this temple was built in one night. I don't know,
by these magical people.
Yeah, it's wild.
And not just that it happened that way, but once the sun came up in some of the stories, work had to cease. It's not like, oh, they happened to do it. No, they're bound by a law or something. You know.
Yeah. All back. That was the deal.
Yep.
They were like, "Hey, we're gonna build this temple with these huge blocks. It's gonna be awesome."
I also appreciate
they cut like 7 blocks, and they were like, "Nope, sun's rising."
That is about it.
And what is it called? It's also in the South Pacific, built with the big columnar basalt, also said to have been built in one night.
Not good in betting.
Oh, Easter Island?
No. Nan made all.
I also appreciate, though, that from these stories, there's the element of like, well, we planned for them to do it in one night.
Yeah.
We got it all together for them, you know, and then we're like, guys, we really need this done tonight, you know, and then it's lo and behold, like that's a whole different spin too. That's different than the farmer waking up and it's all been threshed.
Right.
You know, this is sort of like, man, I need this. Let's get it all together and then ask this of the little people of the fairies, however.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like they knew this aspect of them. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Well, they had descendants living among them.
So are they responsible for the crop circles?
All done in one night?
All done in one night?
Could be.
Interesting.
It's more than I could do in a day. Should we keep going, or is that, did we flip those?
I mean, we're about at the end here. It's the final few grains of sand in the sands of time.
Yeah.
So we can stop.
Okay. Well, if you're going to add music in post-production, can you do one of those things where you've already started the music, but then it sounds really cool if we stop it right about now?
Yeah, you can do that.
The music or the podcast?
Yeah.
final segment, ladies and gentlemen. Another great, but small episode.
Little.
On the little people. I think we're actually you're gonna wrap up some stuff. We're gonna do a little bit more, and then we'll do producers and space weather news and whatnot.
Yeah, and then we're going to have a Patreon segment.
That's right.
Do some continued discussion and go back to some of the stuff that was skipped.
A little Patreon episode.
Yeah, just small.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Lowercase p, Patreon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to do one more. It actually goes quite well as a follow-up to the Menehunes in Hawaii, and this is the Kijimuna, the Okinawan tree spirit. So
Kijimuna.
Yes, the Kijimuna.
Yes, of course.
Yes, the Kijimuna. So this one I dug through archive.org and pulled up an old version of a website. So this is from the Chicago Okinawan, their website. So published in March of 2012. So I had to actually go to website and looked it up, archive.org, and looked through it and pulled this website up. So that was published in 2012, but then was taken off at some point. But just to let you know what the Chicago Okinawa Kinjinkai is, they are they're a nonprofit 501c3. Their purpose is to promote goodwill and friendship among those interested in the Okinawan culture, promote educational opportunities, cultural education through sponsoring performances, and understanding of Okinawan culture. So it's just a Chicago group based on Okinawan culture, which I think is modern day Japan. I don't know that much about what we're talking about here, for being totally honest. But I'm going to quote what they said about it, and it's their society. So we're hoping they got it right. All right. So Kijimuna, the Okinawan tree sprite. Other names include Bungaya. On the island of Okinawa grow large banyans called Gajumaru, no doubt special trees because they are said to be inhabited by the Kijimuna, mischievous fairy-like spirits that are easily the best-known creatures in Okinawan culture. They are about the size and shape of a little boy, and like so many Asian folk creatures, they have red hair, which may or may not cover their bodies. Also, like many other yokai, the Kijimuna are associated with mysterious fires. Sometimes they are seen wandering along beaches and riverbanks accompanied by ghostly flames, and sometimes they try to steal fire from paper lanterns and run off. While they are tree spirits, the Kijimuna are adept fishermen. Although they are such absent-minded little creatures, they will often eat only one of a fish's eyes before forgetting about the rest of it. Although fond of pranks, they are innocent and friendly and often befriend human beings, helping them with their fishing and sometimes making them rich. These relationships turn bitter easily, though, and often end with the human driving the Kijimuna away with the one thing it absolutely cannot stand: the humble octopus. Here are some details and stories about Kijimuna.
I didn't know.
Yeah, right? No.
Humble.
Listen, I've known a lot of octopuses in my day, and not a one of them had humility. Not a one.
No.
Not a one. The tales of Kijimuna are an important part of Okinawan culture. For hundreds of years, Okinawan parents and grandparents have told their children stories about Kijimuna. Kijimuna live in and around the villages of Okinawa. The people of these villages sometimes call Kijimuna Bunagaya, which means a living thing with a large head. Kijimunas usually live in a big old tree, especially banyan trees. People in Ogimi and Kunigami village in Okinawa believe that Kijimuna are fairies. Kijimuna are short, like little children of 3 or 4 years of age. They have long red or brown hair that covers all their body. Kijimuna come down from the trees in the evening and sometimes attack people. They then cover the person with their body. Most frequently it happens to women who are attacked by the male Kijimuna. It is rare for a man to be covered by a female Kijimuna. A person who is attacked by a Kijimuna is unable to move or breathe. Kijimuna are good fishermen. If a person becomes Kijimuna's friend, it will take that person on its back and fly over the mountains and sea. Kijimuna hates it when humans break wind, and if a person breaks wind on Kijimuna's back, they are usually thrown off a mountain or into the sea. So there we are. There we are.
I think everyone would hate that.
Absolutely. You're riding on my back, and there you go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right. So here's a story about a Kijimuna and a boy of a poor family. Once upon a time, there were two boys in Shimbura. One was of a rich family, and the other was of a poor family. They were good friends, but the poor boy envied the rich boy and sometimes had humiliating experiences. The poor boy became annoyed by his friends visiting, so he ran away and hid in the mountains. Then one day in midsummer, when the boy was sleeping under a tree in the mountains, someone woke him up. He knew at a glance it was a Kijimuna. His parents had often talked to him about Kijimuna, but still he could not believe his own eyes. He never dreamed he would ever see a Kijimuna. Then just to be sure, he pinched himself on the arm. It was true. It really was a Kijimuna. The boy was not afraid, as he knew Kijimuna did not normally bully humans. The boy greeted Kijimuna by saying, "Hi, Sai." Kijimuna also said, "Hi, Sai," and asked, "Why are you here?" The boy replied, "Because we are very poor and there is nothing to eat. And what's more, a boy of a very rich family lives next door. He and I used to be very good friends, but I won't play with him anymore because our circumstances are different. So I came here," answered the boy. "I see," said Kijimuna. "Won't you be my friend then? I'll make you very rich." "Really? Thank you very much." The boy then jumped with joy. "But you must be my friend forever if we are to become friends. If you disappoint me, you'll be poor again. Do you understand?" "Oh, yes, of course, I won't ever disappoint you," the boy said.
Oh, no.
With that, the Kijimuna said, "Well then, I'll see you tomorrow evening." Then he left. The next evening, Kijimuna came to meet the boy as promised. They greeted each other and grabbed their fishing tackle to go to Usukumi Beach. When they reached the beach, Kijimuna said to the boy, "You wait here, I'll catch some fish for you." Kijimuna caught lots of fish. He took out the eyes of the fish and gave what was left to his new friend. Kijimuna said, "Here you go, all these fish are yours. You'd better go and sell them if you want to be rich." Then with a swift goodbye, Kijimuna was gone. As the boy had lots of fish, he decided to go around to every house and sell them. He walked around and yelled out, "Yuko, I'm sorry." The next day, Kijimuna came back to meet the boy, and once again they went fishing. The boy wound up with lots of fish again, and once again sold them to the people of the village. The boy was able to save lots of money, and he soon became richer than the rich boy who lived next door. Then one day the boy said to himself, "I won't go with Kijimuna tonight. I already have a lot of money, and I'm tired of going to the sea so much. Kijimuna surely will be okay by himself." He decided to visit his old friend his old friend, the boy next door. That evening, Kijimuna came to meet the boy as usual, but the boy was not there. Kijimuna called and called for the boy, but the boy didn't appear. Kijimuna knew what happened because he had been deceived many times by humans. Kijimuna said, "I know the boy has broken his promise." The boy was having great fun and played with his next-door neighbor for a very long time. Then afterwards he thought to himself, "I had a great time even though I'd done Kijimuna wrong. Everything will be okay though." But when the boy awoke, all of his money was gone as well as everything he had bought with the money, and the boy never saw Kijimuna again. Now, Kijimuna and children's blotchy faces. In old times, when children in Okinawa had blotchy faces, their grandmothers would tell them, "Oh, Kijimuna gave them to you." On that evening, the grandmother would prepare delicious food and make a pair of straw slippers. They would put the food and slippers on the gate of the house and pray, "Please cure our children." Then they washed the slippers and rubbed the children's blotchy faces with them, and the children were cured. And then that's a story from somebody. So the last few from the website are stories from specific sources. So. The Kijimuna and the Boat of Kyoto. Once upon a time, a Kijimuna made his house in the leaves of a giant adan tree. Every night at the same time, he would visit his friend the fisherman in Kyoto, and they would go fishing. When they caught fish, the Kijimuna liked to eat the eyes. Of course, he would then give the rest of the fish to his friend. But one day, the fisherman became bored and didn't want to fish with Kijimuna anymore. The fisherman decided he would go to the beach and burn the tree of Eden where Kijimuna lived.
God.
When the Kijimuna realized that his friend had burned his home, he ran away to the Ona Mountains. Ever since then, the Kijimuna see a boat from Kyoto, they turn it over in the sea.
Wow.
And then one last one, Kijimuna and a daughter's spirit. Okinawan people say that Kijimuna don't like octopus, and that when Kijimuna catches a fish, he will only eat the eyes before giving the rest of the fish to his friend. One day, Kijimuna said to his friend, "Let's go fishing." And they went to the sea and caught many fish. On the way home, the man was tired, so they stopped to rest in front of a rich man's house. The Kijimuna said, "You rest, and I will visit the rich man," and went inside. When he came out, the man asked, "What did you do in there?" Kijimuna replied, "The rich man's daughter is very sick. So sick, she is going to die, in fact. I took her spirit and put it in this bag, so that she will die the day after tomorrow." When they walked away, the Kijimuna forgot to take the bag with him. The next day, his friend found it and took it back to the house of the rich man. He said to the rich man, "I can make your daughter well again." The rich man said, "If you can make her well, I will let her marry you. If she gets well, I won't be able to thank you enough." He replied, "Okay, then, I will try my best." He gave the spirit bag to the rich man's daughter. The next day, she became very well. They got married and lived happily ever after.
Strange. That is weird. Like, they like fishing. You can tell.
Right.
But this is weird that, like, there's not that much in these stories, at least. There's not a whole lot of what you would consider maybe paranormal until this, he's like, "Oh yeah, I took her spirit and put it in this bag."
Mm-hmm.
Then you're suddenly given a whole different picture, right? It's like, this is just some weird guy that wants to fish. But then he's like, "I'll go visit this guy," and he's like, "I've got her spirit in a bag." That's interesting.
I think it's interesting that they only take the fish's eyes.
Yeah.
Really But it sets you up for a really good, set of pranks you can play on people.
Yeah.
If they're not looking at their fish, you just
pop the eyes out. You think the Kijimuna have been here?
Just like,
whoa, yeah. But this story here, like the one with the boat, the boat of Kyoto, like, what is the deal with this guy? He's like, "I'm bored. I don't want to fish with you anymore. Also, I'm going to go set your home on fire." Like, what? Like, why would he do this?
But it also, so it burned his home and then he ran off to the mountains. So maybe there's a lesson in that because we've done this thing of it seems to be very tied to a particular place, to the point of being tied to specific rocks and things like that. It may be as well, maybe there's an unspoken thing of that's how you can get around a deal you've made, right? It's like, we're supposed to be friends, so I have to hold up to that. Well, if you, the Kijimuna, choose to leave, well, how can I get you to choose to leave? I'll destroy the place that is your home.
I see. He burns the home so that he gets out of the friendship. That's what you mean.
So he gets out of the friendship, so the Kijimuna has to go to the mountains. And maybe then in retaliation, they're like, well, now we just, we destroy some ships in the sea.
We flip over every boat we see from your place. Yeah. Right. Man.
But again, just to wrap it all up, as the point we sort of keep hitting on is that these are surprisingly they're similar to stories from other parts of the world. There's a lot on fishing, but you start doing the thing that we pointed to from the beginning, which is, well, it's an island nation and fishing is an important part of their culture. And if the Fae reflect that, then,
Yeah. There's something in this with punctuality as well. Like, the Kijimuna are like, they want to meet you the same time and they want to do it every day. And so he warns the boy at the beginning, like, if we become friends, you have to be my friend forever, right? So we are going to hang out and fish every day for the rest of your life. And you can see how that could be tiring.
You just got to show up in the morning and just be like, "Listen, bro, I'm going to go do something else today."
Yeah. Well, talk to him.
You should come with me.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, why didn't he change?
Yeah.
Go meet him and be like, "Can we not fish today? Let's go hang out somewhere else." Yeah.
Let me go, like, gloat in front of my old friend.
Yes. Let me go gloat that I am more rich than he is now. Yeah.
He just messed up.
Yep. Screwed it up. All right. Well, that's great. Good stories. And we're going to have more.
And they're covered in hair, too. I was thinking about the bearded, like, so I know this is like Tolkien or whatever, but the dwarves, the women are bearded.
Yeah.
And in the Homo Floresiensis, in the papers and stuff, they were saying that they're all hairy. They're covered in hair.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the females have beards.
Yeah.
When you get this idea too in the Okinawan stories, they're covered in short red hair or covered all over in reddish brown hair. I can't help do the thing of like, well, I wonder how many humans they would have met with red hair if that was a common thing they would have run into, or and if not, where this idea would have come from. But also, it's just so close to Sasquatch stories, and then you get that weird corollary of like, wild man stories.
This is where Dragon Ball Z comes in. It's like this sort of red-haired dude.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think Goku has black hair until he.
Oh, well, I don't know. I never watched.
Then he goes like super Saiyan, and he's got yellow hair. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But there's plenty of. I
don't know, folks.
There's plenty of weird people in that story that have red hair. I could be wrong too.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're both probably wrong.
Yeah. DBZ was not my thing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Obviously, Drew doesn't know either.
Yeah, he's just okay.
Yeah, I got no idea, guys. Oh, man. DBZ. Okay. All right. Yeah, I got nothing. DBZ. I made a sweet Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reference like an hour and a half ago.
Yep.
That's about all I got.
All right. We should wrap it up here.
Yeah.
So the Watcher joined us briefly, but he's on duty, so he's on duty in space. So I just wanted to let people know. He tried to join, but he got a call, and he had to go back out into space. So
that's the way she goes.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
When space calls,
you have to answer. Go. You have to answer when space calls. You have stories at all?
No.
No stories?
Yeah. Still pretty busy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I need to get back.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Well, we can give an ag update.
I mean, we did the Montana trip and all that. And
yeah, we did Montana.
Then, it's been playing catch up since we got back, so.
Yeah, we bottled a lot.
Yeah.
900 gallons. Something like
that. Yeah, I guess it was.
Yeah.
400 cases-ish. I haven't actually counted all of them yet, but...
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was about that much. And with a manual bottling line.
Yeah.
So, it was a long day.
Yep.
And actually, the prep for that took a while as well. So yeah, just been busy with it.
Yeah, we prepped for it. We prepped for it the week before we left for Montana, and we had it set up, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, I'll also like the actual day before. I was cleaning equipment,
cleaning everything setting everything up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it's done.
It's done.
Today, we actually cleaned up afterwards.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah. That was an entire day of cleaning after bottling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be good. We're working on tasting notes for the labels for these wines, a Cabernet and a Montepulciano. And it's going to be good.
Yep.
So it should be on the shelf in like 6 or 8 weeks.
Yep.
Something like that.
There you go. Oh.
Yeah, dang.
Yeah.
God dang. All right. Let's do Space Weather News. You got that button somewhere?
Somewhere.
There it is. From spaceweather.com, where we get all our space weather news. It's there's not a lot of space weather news. Space is very quiet right now. It's called
When It Calls.
You have to answer. That's right. But it says quiet weekend. Last weekend, a CME hit Earth's magnetic field, sparking 2 days of geomagnetic storms and an outburst of rare red auroras. But this weekend will be completely different. No CMEs are headed for Earth, and our planet's magnetic field should remain calm and quiet. That's it. Current conditions, solar wind speed is 442.5 kilometers per second. The density is 5.85 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot number right now is 102. The neutron count is negative 4.4%. And the KP index is 1.67, which is quiet. But the 24-hour max was at 4, which is unsettled. And that is your space weather news for the week.
Did you ever check space weather news while we were in Montana?
No.
Because, like, we had all these crazy radio problems.
Yeah, because
Like, the radios had
There was a CME hitting us last weekend. Yeah, yeah.
The radios had, like, the handheld radios had all these weird issues. It was all, like, multiple people you couldn't receive very well. It was like, it was all messed up. And then we had an FM transmitter that, I mean, we've used this thing so many times and it goes like a mile.
Yeah.
But you couldn't do it like 200 yards. You couldn't hear.
Yep.
It
was
fuzzy.
annoying. Yeah. And we had a long caravan this time.
I was blaming it on the sun. I mean, I was just like, the sun is messing up our radios. But
Yeah. It's probably right. It's probably the sun.
anyways, producers.
Yeah.
We've got one executive producer for this show, and Who Knits sends us $100 for equinoctial celebration, dudes. She says,
Dudes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann.
Awesome. And that's true. It was on September 23rd, so I guess that was the equinox.
Yeah.
She's usually right.
She is. Yeah. And that's not the only, because this is the end of the month, so we'll do the Patreon producers. For executive producers, we have Philip Baklamov, Matt Shy, Peter Shell, and Zachariah Baker, all coming in at Ascended Snake Force Master level on the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. And then associate executive producers from the Patreon, we have Captain River Rat, Chris James, Daniel Gandy, Dave Cortez, and Patrick Hicks, the patron saint of the Snake Bros podcast. Thank you guys all as well for supporting the show. And everybody else, all of you on the Patreon, everybody who sent us stuff through PayPal, and all of you that listen, thank you guys all so much for supporting the show. It's because of you that we can keep doing this.
Yes.
And that we continue to grow, and we're going on trips, we're doing tours, we're exploring the world like we've wanted to do, and reporting back to you guys, mostly.
Always.
Usually.
What are you talking about? We're always reporting back.
We
there.
don't report everything.
Not everything.
But we always report.
That's true.
Yeah,
and thanks to you, Drew. Appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Oh,
Drew.
yeah.
See, this is another
No problem.
part. This is another type of contribution.
Yeah.
It's also
This is the talent version.
yes.
Yeah. And time.
Yeah.
Time and talent.
I feel like the talent.
I also want to thank Troy. Troy is in the Discord, and he has been doing the artwork recently for the Little People shows. He did one for the most recent UFO episode we did with Marty. He's doing the artwork for this episode and probably for the future Little People episodes. And it's awesome. You know, it's great having a
so
real
cool.
artist doing
Yeah.
legit work instead of me just throwing something together for each episode. So thanks a lot to Troy.
And he's filling out like some of the old back catalog, you know.
Yeah, he has been slowly every once in a while. I've told people in the Discord, if you're an artist and you want to make show art for any of the old back catalog episodes, you know, go ahead. And Troy has been making some. So yeah, I'll just put it out there. If any artists are out there and you want to help with show art or you want to make some for old episodes, you know, you can apply. Troy's actually made a whole spreadsheet of which shows don't have art.
Wow.
And which
Nice.
one? Yeah. So you
That's
can
awesome.
and you can get that in the Discord and see, and you can decide like, okay, this episode doesn't have art. I love this episode. I would love to make art for it, and then you can do it, and then you can post it, and I'll update it. So if it's good, you know, it has to be
Yeah.
vetted.
That's right.
Kyle is
And the
Kyle's
critic.
Kyle's the critic here.
Let me see this art.
couple other things to announce. One is we are this kind of came up suddenly, but it's definitely happening now. We are going to be we're having the annular eclipse coming up.
That's right.
And it's passing right over our area here in Texas. And then next year, the total eclipse is also passing over it. We're planning a big event for that, and we're involved in the planning for that. But this year, this annular eclipse, we weren't planning on anything. But the propinator,
that's right,
is throwing an event, and he has asked us to come, and we're going to jam, and we'll probably do the unfinished presentation, some version of it. Maybe Kyle and I can both be up there. That'd be awesome. And do like a proper Snake Bros discussion.
All right, I'll do it.
He said Snake Bros presentation.
Right.
That's both of us. Anyway, so we are going to be there. Does he have a website yet for this?
It's Howl at the Holler.
Howl.com.
Howl.
As in wolves howling.
Howl
Howl at the Holler.com. I'll put it in the show notes. If you guys want to show up, we'll be there.
October 14th.
Yeah.
We're playing a show.
Yeah, we're playing music, and we're doing a presentation, Snake Bros style.
Let me make sure that's right.
The other thing that I wanted to announce is that the upcoming Egypt trip with Ben from Uncharted X, we have the Lebanon extension, where we're going to go to Baalbek and all that. There's a lot of people who can't do the Egypt trip, but would like to go to Lebanon. But going all the way to Lebanon for only 4 or 5 days that's kind of a long trip for that. So Ben has worked with the organizer that we've been working with to add some days onto the Lebanon trip before all the Egypt crew get there. So in other words, if you just want to do the Lebanon trip, you can go and it can be like a proper, what is it going to be, like a week and a half or something, or a week?
I can't remember.
Anyway, they're adding an extension to the Lebanon trip, but it's a pre-extension, not a post one. So if you'd like to go to Lebanon and see more than what we're going to see as an extension to the Egypt trip, you can go, and then we'll all the Egypt people will meet up with you midway, and then we'll go see Baalbek and all that stuff. So you can check that out. Ben's giving me a link for it. I don't have it with me right now, but I will put it in the show notes where you can get more details on the Lebanon extension. And the extension to the extension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, just, unchartedx.com.
Yeah.
You can find info
unchartedx.com tours. Yeah. You'll find it. But I'll put the specific link for the details on this in the show notes as well. All right. I think that's it.
Yeah. You got anything to say, Drew? You got any announcements?
Yeah.
What's going on next?
Oh, man.
How much more of this we got?
That's actually a decent question. Thought at first
I think we ended on page
just throwing
72
crap out there, but that was a decent question. Hey, nice. Yeah. So there are there's a very short one on China, and then we've got Mexico and Central America, and then after that is Native Americans. That's the fun stuff. That'll take, that's whatever. 80 to 109. That's probably 25 pages. So that's a full episode. So hopefully we can get it done in one more. It may drag into one after that, depending on how much chat we have around the Native American ones. But there's a fair few in the Native American section, and a few of them I think merit conversations, if for no other reason than they're just absolute badass stories.
Cool.
Great.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Well, the next one won't be next week. We have somebody coming in. And we're going to change gears drastically and do and do an interesting episode with her, and then we'll go back to Drew. Yeah. Sorry, bro. Somebody's coming in studio, So
I could drive there. It's not far from
You're welcome.
Kansas.
You're welcome to drive here. Yeah. We could do the
Boy,
final.
Is she gonna be surprised?
We could do the final episode with you on Little People in studio, in person.
Oh man, whoever she is, she's gonna be pissed.
Yeah, it should be an interesting episode. I'm not quite sure where it's gonna go with her, but it's gonna be awesome. It'll be new territory for Snake Bros for the most part, I think. So
Wow. No, I really am intrigued. I really do want to know.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and listen. I'll listen
okay,
to
all
this
right.
one.
You'll listen to it? Okay.
I'll do it. I'll listen to it. I'll listen to it.
Okay, so that'll be episode 300.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then he'll be coming back. Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. Thank you guys again so much for supporting the show and for listening. We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
Yeah. Nails it every time.
He always does.
Every time.